Hey, welcome back, Algebra 2 students. Today we're looking at rationalizing radical denominators with conjugates. So before we begin, we have to understand what a conjugate is. And the word sounds very complicated, but it's not that bad in practice. So a conjugate is a binomial with the same terms but inverse operation. So what this means is that if we have a plus, then the conjugate has a minus. If we have a minus, then the conjugate has a plus. So if we're looking at square root 2 minus 1, then the conjugate of that would be square root 2 plus 1. Right, so it's just that we have the different operation. Alright, so if you can understand that, then the setup of this is not too bad. So the reason why we conjugate to rationalize is because we don't want square roots in our denominators. Is something that we talked about. Maybe we haven't talked about it yet, but something we will talk about, but we don't want the square roots in the denominator. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the top and bottom of our fractions with our conjugate. So if we look at this, our denominator is 3 square root 2 plus 1. So we're going to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator, which is 3 square root 2 minus 1 on top and bottom. Right, and because we're multiplying by the same thing on top and bottom, we're not changing the value of our fraction, we're just changing the look of it. So what happens here is we're going to distribute the top, and we're going to distribute out the bottom. Alright, so let's change colors here. On top we have negative 7 times 3 square root 2, so we can only multiply the constants with constants. We can't multiply it with the things inside of our radicals, so we just do negative 7 times 3 is negative 21, and then we have the square root 2 attached to it. Then the next one, negative 7 times negative 1 is positive 7. Now in the bottom we have 3 square root 2 times 3 square root of 2, which is 9, right? 3 times 3 is 9, and square root of 4, which is 2, so we have 9 times 2. And then we have negative 1 times square root 3 over 2 is negative 3 square root 2. And then we have this one here, which is positive 3 square root 2. And then 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Now the important thing to know about conjugating is the whole point of this is that these middle terms are always going to be opposites, and they're going to make 0 here. So negative 3 square root 2 plus 3 square root of 2, that's going to be 0 every time, our middle term. So let's clean this up a little bit. The top doesn't change, but we're going to say 9 times 2 is 18, minus our 1 is 17. And now we no longer have the square root in our denominator, so this would be simplified form for the for what we started with. Let's do another one. So again, we're focusing on our denominator. We're going to write the conjugate of that. We're multiplying by the conjugate. So instead of a minus, we have a plus. We're going to do that top and bottom. Alright, and then we're going to multiply out. So I'll put parentheses around here because the fraction bar implies grouping. Right, so just so we don't forget to do that. Alright, let's jump into it. So on the top, square root 3 times 3 square root of 3. Well, the square root of 3 times square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which is 3, and then we have this 3 here. So 3 times 3 is 9. And we have square root 3 times square root 7 is square root 21, right? We can multiply radicals. Then we have this one, square root 7 times 3 square root 3 is 3 square root 21. And then the last one on top, square root 7 times square root of 7 is square root of 49, which is just 7. Okay, on the bottom in the denominator, 3 square root 3 times 3 square root of 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Square root 3 times square root 3 is square root 9, which is 3. So 9 times 3 is 27. Then we do this one. 3 square root of 3 times square root 7 is 3 square root 21. Then we move on to our square root 7. Don't forget your sign here. Negative 7 times 3 square root 3 is negative 3 square root 21, right? Just like we said, we want the middles to cancel out to make 0. And then the last one, square root 7 times square root 7 is square root 49, or 7. Oops, and that should be a negative, sorry. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit. On top, 9 plus 7 is 16. Square root 21 plus 3 square root 21 is 4 square root 21. On the bottom, 3 square root 21 minus 3 square root 21 is 0. And then 27 minus 7 is 20. Now, they may accept this answer, but be careful. Look, the 20, the 16, and the 4 are all divisible by 4. So what we can do is we can take out the 4 and reduce it. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, square root 21. And then 20 divided by 4 is 5. So it may have you go all the way to this point. Because we can take out common factors and simplify. Okay, on to the last one. Excuse me. So this one has an x in it, but we're still doing the same idea. So we're multiplying by the conjugate, top and bottom. Oops. Okay, so we're distributing top and bottom. So what we get is 7. Negative 7 times 5 is negative 35. Negative 7 times... Oops. It shouldn't be there. Oops. 2 square root x is going to be negative 14 square root x. And then in the denominator, 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 2 square root x is 10 square root x. Moving on to the next term, negative 2 square root x times 5 is negative 10 square root x. And then lastly, negative 2 times 2 is negative 4 square root x squared. Oops. Right, because we're multiplying square root x times itself, it's squared. Now let's clean this up. There's nothing to do in the numerator yet. In the denominator, we have the 25. 10 minus 10 is gone. And then this part, negative 4. And then the square and the square root cancel out, so we just have x. Okay? And that is in simplest form. We can't take anything out and simplify it. Alright, so that's it for today. Good job.